The morning sun rose over New Haven Colony like any other day. Jake Morrison stood at his office window watching the farmers work in the green fields below. The colony had been peaceful for 15 years. 40,000 people lived here growing food for 3 star systems. Nobody expected trouble to come from the sky. Amy Sullivan sat at her computer trying to talk to the strange ships that appeared above the clouds. Her fingers moved fast across the buttons but got no answer back. The ships looked like silver tears falling from the orange sky. They moved in perfect patterns like dancers in the air. Jake turned from the window when Amy called his name. His face showed worry for the first time in years. New Haven Colony had never seen war. The people here were farmers and scientists, not soldiers. They had small guns for wild animals and a few space platforms to stop rocks from hitting the planet. Nothing more. Ben Carter watched his screens at the sensor station. The numbers made no sense. 12 ships for sure, maybe more hiding in the clouds. The ships were beautiful but scary. They had smooth curves like living things mixed with crystal surfaces that moved like water. Ben had never seen anything like them in all his years watching space. Dr. Lisa Park ran into the command center holding her tablet tight in both hands. She had been studying the ships since they appeared. The way they moved and how fast they came down told her everything she needed to know. These were not traders or explorers. These were warships coming to take what they wanted. Jake felt his stomach drop when Lisa told him what she thought. The colony had been built for peace. The people here had never fought anyone except maybe a drunk miner or a smuggler, trying to hide stolen goods. They grew crops and studied plants and raised families. War was something that happened to other people far away. The first red beam came without warning. It hit the main power station and exploded like a small sun. Half the colony went dark in seconds. Emergency lights came on, but everyone knew what the message meant. The aliens were not here to talk. Jake grabbed the microphone and spoke to everyone in the colony. His voice carried to every home and workplace. All people must go to the emergency shelters right now. This was real danger, not a practice drill. Security teams must get their weapons and go to fighting positions. The alien ships came down lower, making a deep humming sound that made the ground shake. The first landing ship touched down near the food-growing areas. Soldiers came out wearing suits that shined like metal. They moved like they had done this many times before. Jake watched from his window as the aliens moved through his colony. They had energy shields that stopped human bullets like rain hitting a roof. Their own weapons cut through walls like paper. The few security guards who tried to fight were pushed aside easily. This was not a battle. This was a harvest. The aliens herded people into glowing cages made of light. Families were separated. Children cried for their parents. Old people fell down and could not get up. The aliens showed no feeling at all. They worked like machines sorting crops for storage. Amy kept trying to send messages to other colonies and to Earth. Most signals could not get through the alien jamming. But she remembered an old emergency frequency from her training. It was very old, from before the peaceful government took over. She was not supposed to know about it. The frequency belonged to something called the Terran Military Authority. Amy had learned about it in school but thought it was history. The government had told everyone that the old military was gone. Humanity had become peaceful. There was no need for war machines anymore. Amy sent the emergency message on the old frequency. She used codes that should not work anymore, and marked it with the highest danger level. If anyone was listening on the old networks, they would have to respond. The law said they could not ignore a priority alpha message. The message traveled through space on a network that most people had forgotten. Relay stations that were supposed to be turned off woke up and passed the signal along. Deep under the moon, old computers started working for the first time in many years. Admiral Chris Bolton was reading shipping reports when Captain Helen Torres burst into his office. Her face was white with shock. She carried a printout that showed impossible information. A priority alpha message had come through the Aegis network. Chris looked up confused. The Aegis network was supposed to be shut down decades ago. It was built when humans first went to space and were afraid of everything. The new peaceful government said such paranoid systems were not needed anymore. Helen explained that the message came from New Haven Colony. They were under attack by unknown aliens. People were being taken away. The colony was falling and needed immediate help. But what scared Helen most was that the message had authorization codes that should not exist. Chris felt cold fear in his chest. He ordered Helen to call Admiral Patricia Hughes at Deep Space Command. He also told her to wake up the Genesis Committee. These were names and organizations that were not supposed to exist in the peaceful galaxy humanity had built. As emergency signals spread across human space, hidden machines began to wake up. On a dozen worlds in secret places buried deep underground, massive computers started their awakening programs. The colonial administration had told people that humanity's military was very small now. They said the age of human war was over forever. They had told many things that were not completely true. Far beneath the surface of Mars, Admiral Patricia Hughes stood before a huge metal door. The door had warnings written in 17 languages, but they all said the same thing. Last resort. The door had not been opened in 93 years. General Scott Williams stood beside her looking worried. Once they started this process, there would be no way to stop it. The peaceful government would never forgive them for what they were about to do. But 6 colonies had gone silent in 12 hours. New Haven was just the beginning. Hughes put her hand on the scanner. The door opened with a long hiss. Inside were rows and rows of sleeping chambers. Each one held a person in deep freeze sleep. The nameplates read like a list of the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced. Veterans of wars the public had been told never happened. Hughes gave the order to wake them all. Across multiple hidden bases, the same scene played out. The true size of humanity's secret military began to show itself. On the moon, fake mining operations revealed themselves as massive shipbuilding facilities. In the asteroid belt, mineral processing plants started building weapons that were bigger than anything the current human military had. The peaceful galaxy was about to remember what humanity looked like when it stopped pretending to be harmless. Deep under the red surface of Mars, Admiral Patricia Hughes walked through corridors that had been dark for almost 100 years. The air smelled old and metallic, but the machines still worked perfectly. Everything had been waiting for this moment, the day humanity might need its hidden strength again. General Scott Williams followed behind her, looking at the rows of sleeping chambers. Each glass tube held a person who had volunteered to sleep until the human race faced extinction. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the best fighters humanity had ever created, enhanced with technology that made them faster and stronger than normal people. The revival process began slowly. One by one, the sleeping giants opened their eyes for the first time in decades. Medical machines checked their bodies while computer systems updated their knowledge about the current state of human space. They learned about the peaceful colonies, the new government, and the alien invasion that had changed everything. Captain Ryan Fox woke up in a medical bay that looked exactly the same as when he went to sleep 80 years ago. His body felt strange as the enhancement chemicals started working again. His muscles were stronger, his mind was faster, and his senses were sharper than any normal human could imagine. A doctor told him about the alien attack on New Haven Colony. Multiple human worlds had been hit by creatures they called the Collective. The current human military could not even scratch the alien ships. It was time to activate the Titan Protocol, the last weapon humanity had kept hidden from the galaxy. Ryan sat up slowly and reached for his uniform. The black and silver clothes marked him as a member of the Terran Strike Corps, a military unit that officially never existed. These soldiers had fought in wars that were erased from history books because the peaceful government thought humanity's violent past was shameful. Across human space, similar scenes happened on hidden bases. The forgotten giants returned to life after decades of sleep. They were veterans of secret battles against aliens who had tried to destroy humanity before. The government had put them to sleep when peace seemed possible, but they had always been ready to wake up if needed. Colonel Lisa Martinez opened her eyes aboard the warship Leviathan. The ship was supposed to have been destroyed decades ago, but instead had been kept in perfect condition. It waited in a secret fleet base beyond the edge of the solar system, where no one would think to look for it. Lisa made her way through corridors filled with other awakening soldiers. Each person wore the same look of grim determination. They had been enhanced beyond normal human limits and trained for one purpose only. They existed to make sure the human race would survive no matter what tried to destroy it. The Situation Room showed tactical displays of the alien advance. The enemy had taken 43 colonies in 18 hours. They moved with perfect coordination toward the core human systems. Their ships stripped each world of resources and people before moving on to the next target. Intelligence Officer Nancy Price explained what they knew about the enemy. The aliens seemed to share one mind controlling all their ships. Their weapons used gravity to crush targets. They showed no interest in talking or making deals. They took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. Lisa studied the information flowing across multiple screens. The aliens were hitting food-growing worlds and factory planets first. They wanted to cut off supplies to Earth and the other core worlds. Within weeks, billions of humans would be starving even if they were not directly attacked. Nancy told her about their own fleet strength. 400 Titan-class ships were coming online with thousands of support craft. These were not the peaceful exploration vessels the public knew about. They were pure war machines, built with technology that pushed the limits of science. The Titan-class ships had been designed by military engineers who understood that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the threat of overwhelming violence. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets and armor that could survive the explosion of stars. They were crewed by enhanced soldiers who had been selected for their ability to make hard choices. Admiral Hughes coordinated the awakening from her command center on Luna Station. Reports came in from across human space as hidden facilities revealed themselves. The true size of humanity's secret military became clear for the first time since the peaceful government took power. On Europa, underground factories started producing ammunition that had been banned by galactic treaties. On Titan, research stations began building weapons that used the fundamental forces of the universe as tools of war. In the asteroid belt, mining ships revealed themselves as mobile weapons platforms disguised as civilian vessels. The peaceful colonies that remained free began to receive strange broadcasts. Ships that did not appear in any official records announced themselves as human military vessels. Soldiers who looked too perfect to be natural offered to help evacuate civilians or provide protection from alien attack. Captain Derek Stone commanded one of the newly awakened Titan-class ships. The massive vessel was 1.5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. His crew consisted entirely of enhanced veterans who had been sleeping since the last secret war ended. Derek looked at the tactical displays showing alien fleet movements. The enemy was methodical and efficient, but they had made one critical mistake. They had studied only the recent, peaceful period of human expansion. They had no idea what lay sleeping beneath the surface of human civilization. The aliens had seen farmers and traders spreading slowly across the galaxy. They thought they were harvesting a soft species that had forgotten how to fight. They did not know about the warriors who had been waiting in the dark, ready to remind the galaxy what humanity looked like when it was threatened. Messages began spreading through human space on communication networks that were supposed to be shut down. The signals used authorization codes that made them impossible to ignore. Emergency protocols activated on every human world, even ones that had been told such procedures no longer existed. The message was simple but carried implications that would change everything. The Terran Strike Corps was awake and taking command of human military operations. All colonies were authorized to implement total war procedures. The giants had awakened and they would show the aliens what humanity looked like when it stopped pretending to be peaceful. Hidden shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining. Operations began launching. Vessels that dwarfed anything in the current human fleet. Soldiers who had been enhanced beyond the normal limits of their species prepared for a war that would determine whether humanity survived or joined the thousands of other races the aliens had already harvested. The collective had made the mistake of thinking they were attacking a civilization of farmers and scientists. They were about to discover they had awakened the most dangerous predator species the galaxy had ever produced. The collective had conquered over 4,000 different species in their 3-million-year expansion across the galaxy. They had seen every type of defense and every kind of weapon that civilizations could create. Most species fought with normal weapons until they were overwhelmed, then surrendered to save what remained of their people. Others tried to run away to distant star systems where they could be hunted down slowly. None had ever gone completely quiet for 3 days and then returned with ships that should not exist. Hive Node Prime processed the strange information as its fleet approached the human core system of Alpha Centauri. The harvest operation should have been routine work. 7 agricultural worlds with weak defenses and millions of people ready for processing. Instead, the harvest fleets had found something they had never seen before. The humans had fought back with weapons that made no sense according to their technology level. Even worse, they had fought with coordination and tactical skill that suggested a military tradition much deeper than their recent peaceful expansion showed. Commander, Derek Stone stood on the bridge of his warship Ragnarok, watching as his battle group came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Alpha Centauri system. The Titan-class ship was massive, bristling with weapon systems that had been theoretical concepts when the collective began their invasion. Major Kate Williams reported from her tactical station that she detected 1,200 enemy vessels in various sizes. They were holding position around Proxima Alpha, apparently in the middle of a harvest operation. The planet that had been home to 8 million humans just a week ago now showed massive industrial activity as the aliens converted human buildings for their own use. Derek nodded grimly and gave orders to signal the fleet. All ships should move to combat formation and load their most powerful weapons. It was time to introduce the aliens to the real human military properly. The human battle group consisted of 20 Titan-class ships supported by hundreds of smaller vessels. Destroyers, frigates, and the new Wraith-class stealth ships that could phase partially out of normal space. Every vessel was crewed by veterans of humanity's forgotten wars. Soldiers who understood they were not just fighting for territory or resources, but for the right of their species to exist. The collective fleet detected the human approach and moved to intercept with the same methodical precision they had shown throughout their invasion. Their ships formed perfect, geometric patterns with energy shields shimmering as they prepared for what they assumed would be another routine extermination of a primitive species. They had not prepared for humanity's creativity in the art of violence. Derek commanded all ships to open fire and target the largest enemy vessels first. The Ragnarok unleashed its main weapon, a directed gravitational pulse that could compress matter at the level of atoms. The beam struck the leading collective ship and simply unmade a section of its hull, causing the entire vessel to break apart. Across the battle line, similar weapons opened fire. Quantum disruptors that unraveled the forces holding atoms together. Temporal mines that created localized time distortions. Phase cannons that fired projectiles through parallel dimensions where the laws of physics work differently. For the first time in 3 million years, the collective experienced something they had forgotten was possible. They were surprised. Their ships began taking damage from weapons that should not have been able to penetrate their shields or armor. The human fleet moved like a pack of hunting animals, coordinating their attacks with an instinctive understanding of group tactics. The larger ships drew enemy attention while smaller vessels darted in and out, striking at critical systems with surgical precision. Captain Julia Hayes commanded one of the Wraith-class ships as it phased in and out of normal space like a ghost. Her crew had been enhanced beyond normal human limits with faster reflexes, improved thinking speed, and perfect coordination through quantum-linked neural implants that let them share thoughts instantly. Julia ordered her weapons officer to target the enemy command ship with a full spread of phase torpedoes. The weapons materialized inside the collective vessel's hull, bypassing its shields entirely. The explosions tore through critical systems and the massive ship began to drift as its control networks failed. But the collective learned quickly. Their ships began adapting their shield frequencies and compensating for weapons they had never encountered before. Return fire from their gravitational weapons started finding targets and human ships began to take damage. Derek observed that the enemy was learning faster than expected. He ordered all ships to implement Protocol 7, a tactic that the collective could not have prepared for because it went against everything they understood about civilized warfare. Instead of maintaining formation and trading fire like reasonable species did, the human fleet suddenly dispersed into individual combat units. Each ship began operating with complete independence, following no predictable pattern or strategy. It was chaos. It was unpredictable. It was utterly and completely human. The Wraith ships began using their phase drives to appear inside enemy formations, firing at point-blank range before disappearing again. The Titan-class ships used their massive armor to ram smaller collective vessels, their crews treating their own ships as kinetic weapons. One human destroyer with failing engines and hull breaches in a dozen places set course directly for a collective cruiser and detonated its antimatter power core at the moment of impact. The explosion vaporized both ships and sent shock waves through the enemy formation. Hive node. Prime felt something it had not experienced in millions of years. Confusion. The humans were fighting like creatures who had lost their minds, throwing away their lives for tactical advantages that made no logical sense. They were using their own ships as weapons, sacrificing valuable resources for momentary gains that any rational species would avoid. And somehow, impossibly, they were winning. The battle raged for 6 hours. When the last collective ship either fled or was destroyed, the human fleet had lost nearly 40% of its vessels. By any rational measure, it should have been considered a defeat. The humans celebrated it as a victory. Derek requested a casualty report from Major Williams. 8 ships lost with 14 more requiring major repairs. But they had recovered the orbital installations. Around Proxima Alpha, most of the planet's population was gone. But they had rescued about 200,000 people from the alien processing centers. Derek nodded solemnly. 200,000 out of 8 million. The collective had completed their harvest, but they had also learned that humanity would make them pay dearly for every life taken. As the human fleet regrouped and began rescue operations, emergency broadcasts went out to every human colony and settlement. Admiral Patricia Hughes announced that the collective had declared war on the human species through their actions. All colonies were authorized to implement total war protocols. The giants had awakened, and they would show these invaders what humanity looked like when it stopped pretending to be civilized. The war for humanity's survival had begun, but the collective was about to discover that they had not invaded a peaceful confederation of farmers and traders. They had awakened a species that had evolved through millions of years of competition and violence. A species that had turned warfare into an art form and survival into a sacred duty. 3 weeks after the Battle of Proxima Alpha, the collective's Hive Node Prime received intelligence reports that challenged everything they understood about the human species. The soft agricultural civilization they had targeted for routine harvest had somehow produced a military force that defied all logical explanation. The humans were not just fighting back. They were evolving their tactics in real time, adapting to collective technology faster than should have been possible for any organic species. Even worse, they seemed to possess industrial capabilities that exceeded the collective's own manufacturing systems. Admiral Patricia Hughes stood in the command center of Titan Station, humanity's most closely guarded secret. Built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the Kuiper Belt, the station was invisible to long-range sensors and protected by defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets. Around her, displays showed the current state of the war with 127 human colonies lost. But the collective advance had been stopped cold at 3 different fronts. General Scott Williams consulted his tablet and reported that the production facilities were at full capacity. They were launching new ships faster than they were losing them. The automated shipyards in the asteroid belt were producing 1 Titan-class vessel every 18 hours, with support craft rolling off the assembly lines continuously. Hughes nodded with satisfaction. The collective had made the mistake of studying only humanity's recent peaceful period of expansion. They had no idea that buried beneath the appearance of agricultural settlements and trade colonies lay the most sophisticated military-industrial complex the galaxy had ever seen. Williams reported that the enhancement programs were exceeding all projections. Apparently, watching your neighbors get harvested by aliens was excellent motivation for volunteering for genetic modification. When word spread that enhancement procedures were available, the same treatments that had created the forgotten giants, volunteers had flooded recruitment centers across human space. Farmers, miners, teachers, and shopkeepers were lining up to undergo procedures that would transform them into living weapons. The human response to the invasion had surprised even Hughes, who had spent decades planning for this possibility. Captain Ryan Fox emerged from the medical bay of his ship, his body still adapting to the latest round of enhancements. The biotechnology that had created the original super soldiers had been refined during their decades of sleep, and the new generation of enhanced humans surpassed even the giants in capability. Dr. Karen Bell asked how he felt as she monitored his vital signs. Fox flexed his hands, feeling the increased strength and speed flowing through his enhanced nervous system. His reflexes were now fast enough to dodge energy weapons fire. His thinking speed was accelerated to superhuman levels, and his body could survive in environments that would kill normal humans. Fox replied that he felt like he could take on a collective cruiser with just a knife. Bell admitted that might not be entirely impossible. The new enhancement package included adaptive camouflage, electromagnetic interference generation, and limited matter phasing. He was essentially a one-man army now. Fox made his way to the bridge where Colonel Lisa Martinez was reviewing tactical data from the latest engagements. The collective had learned to be wary of human unpredictability, but they continued to underestimate humanity's capacity for escalation. Martinez told him their next target was the Vega system. Intelligence indicated the aliens were establishing a major processing facility there. 17 colonies worth of population were being held in containment fields while the collective built infrastructure to convert them into whatever they did with harvested species. Fox studied the tactical display. Vega was heavily defended with over 300 collective ships in defensive positions around 5 planets. It would be a massacre for any conventional military force. Fortunately, humanity had moved well beyond conventional warfare. Martinez explained they were taking the Phantom Fleet, 50 Wraith-class ships all crewed by enhanced personnel. The plan was to phase directly into the enemy defensive grid and hit their command vessels before they could coordinate a response. The Phantom Fleet was humanity's newest tactical innovation. Ships and crews that could exist partially outside normal space, making them effectively invisible to most sensors until they chose to attack. Combined with enhanced crews who could think and react faster than organic beings should be able to, they represented warfare on a level the collective had never encountered. As the human fleet prepared for the assault on Vega, similar operations were being planned across a dozen fronts. The war had become a test of adaptation, and humanity was proving to be the most adaptable species the galaxy had ever produced. Captain Julia Hayes stood in the briefing room of her ship addressing her crew of enhanced soldiers. Each one represented the pinnacle of human evolution, faster, stronger, smarter, and more durable than any normal human. More importantly, they had been trained from childhood in the arts of war by veterans who had learned their trade in conflicts the public had never heard of. Hayes explained that their target was the enemy primary command ship, highlighting a massive collective vessel on the tactical display. Intelligence suggested it was not just controlling local operations, but coordinating harvest activities across multiple systems. If they could destroy it, they might disrupt the entire regional command structure. Lieutenant Sam Brooks asked about radiation from their power core. Previous intelligence suggested collective ships used contained black holes for power. Hayes replied that the enhancement package included radiation resistance. He could survive inside a reactor core for several minutes. Besides, they were not planning to stay long enough for radiation to be a problem. The assault on Vega began at 3 a.m. Standard Time, with the Phantom Fleet emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. To collective sensors, empty space suddenly filled with human ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The Wraith-class vessels phased into normal space just long enough to fire their weapons, then disappeared again before return fire could target them. It was like fighting ghosts that could hurt you, but could not be hurt in return. Hayes piloted her ship through the collective formation like a dancer, appearing behind enemy vessels to deliver killing blows before vanishing into parallel space. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to process incoming fire, patterns, and phase out of normal space. Nanoseconds before weapons reached her position, she ordered her weapons officer to target the command ship's bridge section with phase torpedoes at full spread. The torpedoes materialized inside the collective command vessel's control center, precisely where the ship's hive mind interface would be located. The explosions severed the neural connections that allowed the ship to coordinate fleet movements, turning the ordered collective formation into chaos. Without central coordination, the collective ships began firing on each other as their individual computer systems tried to establish new command hierarchies. The human fleet took advantage of the confusion to systematically destroy the larger vessels while avoiding the disorganized return fire. But the real shock came when the enhanced human crews began boarding operations directly through the hulls of enemy ships. 6 months after the first collective ships appeared over New Haven Colony, the war had transformed from an invasion into a hunt. The hunters and the hunted, however, were not what anyone might have expected at the beginning. Hive Node Prime existed in a state of constant tactical recalculation. The entity that had once commanded fleets across thousands of star systems now found itself retreating deeper into space, pursued by an enemy that defied every law of warfare the collective had learned in 3 million years of expansion. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned a harvesting operation into a learning experience. Every battle taught them something new about collective technology. Every captured ship provided insights into their manufacturing processes. Every rescued human colony became a recruitment center for warriors who volunteered to be transformed into something beyond the normal limits of their species. Admiral Patricia Hughes stood in the command center of the newly commissioned warship Prometheus, a vessel that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Unlike the hidden ships that had been awakened from storage, this was a purpose-built warship designed specifically to fight the collective. The ship was enormous, 3 kilometers long and armed with weapon systems that pushed the boundaries of physics. More importantly, it was crewed entirely by volunteers who had undergone the full enhancement process, transforming them into beings that existed at the intersection of human creativity and technological perfection. Captain Helen Torres reported final fleet status to Hughes. 2,000 vessels were ready for the final operation. Every ship was crewed by enhanced personnel, and every weapon system was designed from captured collective technology. The enhancement program had processed over 10 million volunteers. Humanity was not the same species it had been when this war started. Hughes nodded solemnly. The transformation of humanity had been necessary, but it came with costs that would not be fully understood for generations. The enhanced humans were stronger, faster, smarter, and more durable than their normal cousins, but they were also something fundamentally different. The question of whether they were still fully human was one that philosophers would debate for centuries. Captain Ryan Fox had become something resembling a force of nature. His latest enhancement package allowed him to survive in hard vacuum, phase through solid matter at will, and process information at quantum speeds. When he moved, he seemed to blur between positions like a living shadow. Fox reported from the sensor station of his ship that the target was confirmed. The collective's primary hive ship was approximately 50,000 kilometers in length. It was surrounded by their entire remaining fleet, over 3,000 vessels in defensive formation. The final battle would take place in an unnamed system at the edge of collective space, where their species had constructed their ultimate fortress. The hive ship was more than just a vessel. It was a mobile world, containing the core consciousness that had directed the collective's expansion for millions of years. Hughes gave the order to begin the assault. What followed was not so much a battle as a demonstration of how far humanity had evolved beyond its original limitations. The enhanced crews fought with perfect coordination, their quantum-linked consciousness allowing them to act as a single organism while maintaining their individual creativity and unpredictability. Captain Julia Hayes led the first wave, her phantom fleet materializing inside the collective's defensive perimeter, like ghosts emerging from the void. The Wraith-class ships moved through the enemy formation like predators, each one capable of phasing in and out of normal space faster than collective targeting systems could compensate. But the real shock came when the enhanced human crews began their assault on the hive ship itself. Lieutenant Sam Brooks and his enhanced team did not bother with conventional boarding procedures. They simply phased through the hive ship's hull and began moving through its interior like living nightmares. Their enhanced bodies could survive the alien atmosphere. Their modified nervous systems allowed them to interface directly with collective technology, and their human creativity let them improvise tactics that no computer intelligence could predict. Brooks reported over the quantum link that they had reached the central consciousness chamber. The entire ship was essentially one massive brain, he explained with awe in his voice. The collective's hive mind had never experienced individual consciousness within its structure. When the enhanced humans began moving through its neural pathways, directly interfacing with its thought processes, the entity experienced something unprecedented. Fear. For the first time in 3 million years, the collective understood that it was facing something genuinely superior. The humans were not just another species to be harvested. They were an evolutionary step beyond what the collective had become, combining the efficiency of hive mind coordination with the unpredictability of individual consciousness. Colonel Lisa Martinez led the final assault on the hive ship's core, her enhanced team moving through defenses that had been designed to stop armies. Her soldiers phased through energy barriers, absorbed weapons fire that would have destroyed conventional troops, and adapted to alien technology faster than the collective could modify its defenses. Martinez reported that they had access to the central data core and were beginning information extraction. What they found in the collective's memories changed everything. The hive mind had encountered thousands of species during its expansion, absorbing their knowledge and technology while eliminating their individual consciousness. But buried deep in its databanks were records of species that had fought back, that had forced the collective to evolve and grow stronger. Humanity was not the first species to challenge the collective, but they were the first to win. As the enhanced human crews systematically dismantled the hive ship's defenses and captured its core consciousness, the remaining collective fleet found itself without central coordination. Ships began shutting down as their individual computer systems realized they could no longer function without the hive mind's guidance. The war was over, but its consequences were just beginning. Hughes announced to the human fleet that Hive Node Prime had been captured intact. They now had access to the collective's complete database. 3 million years of galactic history, technological development, and information about every species they had encountered. Captain Torres looked at the readouts from the captured hive ship with a mixture of awe and concern. According to the data, the collective was not the apex predator in this galaxy. They were running from something else, something that forced them to keep expanding and consuming, to stay ahead of whatever was out there. Hughes studied the data, her enhanced mind processing information at superhuman speed. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but humanity had proven something important. They could adapt to any threat, transform themselves to meet any challenge, and emerge stronger from every conflict. Hughes said calmly that they would meet that challenge when it came. For now, they had colonies to rebuild and a species to integrate back into normal space. The enhanced humans would need time to adjust to peacetime conditions, and they would need to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to build with their new capabilities. As the human fleet began the long journey home, carrying with them the accumulated knowledge of a galactic empire and the captured consciousness of their former enemy, one thing was certain. Humanity had proven that they were not just another species struggling to survive in a hostile universe. They were the universe's new apex predator, and they had only just begun to understand what that meant.